Hey there, good afternoon or good evening. Welcome to Prog Monster. My name's Murph. I'm the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock, hard rock, heavy metal, and other rock genre. So, today we're starting a new set of videos that was suggested to me by BP, one of my subscribers. I really like the idea. It was really nice of him to suggest this, or her. And I just think that it's a good idea because it encompasses basically what this video will be about is artists who rock and roll greats or rock influential artists who have since passed along, and I just want to give them some recognition for the greatness of the things that they've done to contribute to rock music, which is something I love and a lot of other people do as well. So what we're going to be doing is that I'm going to start in the year 1964 and go all the way up to the year 2022, or 57 episodes, in which I will be doing two people that passed along in each year. I'm going to give them some attention here and talk about them a bit and about their music and what they influenced and where they came from and what happened to them and that stuff. So I chose two for today. Both of them were mostly active in the 1950s and early 60s, of course. Both passed away in 1964. And both were pretty influential, I think, in their particular type of rock, or pre-rock, or music that led to rock genres. Okay, so the first one we're going to do, we're doing this chronologically from the point that they passed. So the first one we're going to do is Johnny Burnette of the Johnny Burnette Trio. Okay, so Johnny Burnette was a singer who was born on March 25th, 1934 in Lauderdale, Memphis. And he died August the 14th, 1964 in Clearwater, California, as a result of a boating accident in which he drowned. So anyways, he was 30 years old when that took place, and he had begun a career as a singer in the rockabilly, kind of rock and roll field. I think his music was a little more rock and roll than rockabilly, but he actually has a few songs that were nominated or put into the Rockabilly Hall of Fame, which I'm not sure where that is. I would assume it's somewhere in Memphis, but I'm not sure. Anyways, so what it was about this guy, okay, he was your typical rock star or pre-rock star, if that you want to call that, from the 1950s. He had that greased back hair, clean cut, smooth looking, good looking guy, well dressed, well mannered, but of course, when the grease style didn't really sit that well at the time period with the older people, but definitely resonated with the younger people. So anyways, again, he was in the rockabilly, and this may be a field that many people might find hard to believe I would like, because I'm not a big country western fan. Got maybe too much of that from my parents when I was a kid, but I do like rockabilly. There's been a few bands that I've gone to bar bands to see that were rockabilly bands that I liked quite a bit, and Stray Cats was a band I liked in the 80s, and so I kind of like the stuff that he does here too. So anyways, he basically he could play acoustic guitar, but he was basically a vocalist. That's what he did, and he had his pretty smooth voice. Pretty standard voice for that type of music for that period. He was active from 1952 through to 1964, and his family included his mother and father, Willie Mae and Dorset Burnett Jr. He had one sibling, at least one sibling that was mentioned, and one sibling that he was involved with, which was Dorset Burnett Jr. Okay, so what happened was he started a band with his brother, Johnny and Dorset Burnett, and then they added another guy, let me guess, his name was Burleson, Paul Burleson. He was the lead guitar player for the band. So they were a threesome. I wouldn't say they were a power trio, but they were definitely a threesome that did that rockabilly sound, and they toured and did stuff together. He was the vocalist, and his brother played the bass. And in those days, they didn't have the electric bass; they just had that big acoustic bass. And you'll see, if you watch any videos, you'll see his brother in the background playing that. So anyways, at some point he kind of went off on his own and started writing stuff and releasing singles. I think he did 6 or 7, or maybe it was 8, somewhere in there, with the B-sides, of course, which was common for the singles of the time, because albums were not very common unless they were collections, at least until the Beatles in the 60s started developing then, and not by everybody, just some really big bands. So anyways, he released a song that kind of attracted me. It was a song that I knew as a kid that I'd listened to. It's called You're 16. And, you might know the song. You're 16, you're beautiful, and you're mine. Okay, so he released that song, and it did reasonably well. He had a few songs that did well on the Billboard 100. Some of them making as high as 8th and 10th place on the list, and a couple of them actually he would have done better, but he got sick and he wasn't able to support them. In those days, if you put out a song, you kind of had to tour and support the song, otherwise it just wouldn't catch on as easily. So he was sick for a while, and then when he got over that, he started releasing more stuff, and he was doing well. He moved from one label to another, and then he had this boating accident which ended his life at 30 years of age. Can you imagine? Just getting started and now you're gone. But the one thing about his music is the story about him and his brother, the one that kind of put them a little bit on the map and started making some headway for them, was when him and his brother didn't get along too well. So he went out west, and then later his brother came and followed him, and they went and they had this map of all the houses in I guess it was in Los Angeles, and one of the houses was Ricky Nelson's house. So they decided that they were going to camp out on Ricky's doorstep until Ricky heard their music. And Ricky was impressed with the music he heard. He did listen to it. He was impressed with it, and he actually then recorded some of their stuff. So this kind of put them on the map. And then they continued to sing, and then of course Johnny went kind of on his own a bit and did his own thing and released some of these other songs. And then he did okay. He wasn't a household name or anything like that. He did okay, but then he passed. But what happened after he passed, well, actually just before he passed, the Beatles did a cover of one of his songs, to which John Lennon had mentioned his name and his brother's name as the artist that had written the song. So they put it out there. And then after he passed, some other notable artists released over time, started releasing some of his stuff as covers, and some of those people included Ringo Starr did You're 16 again, and then you had other bands like Motorhead, Aerosmith, the Yardbirds all did covers from him. And you might say to yourself, you don't see him and Motorhead kind of mixing too well together, but to be honest with you, a lot of people think of Motorhead as a kind of heavy metal band, but in actual fact, they're more of a punk band, or at least that's the way they started out. So I can see them being punk and this kind of rockabilly stuff kind of maybe driving a bit. Anyway, so he had an impact on some of these artists, and they pulled his music forward with them. And in some ways, I guess that kind of immortalized him a bit. He's not a household name, but a guy who definitely deserves to be recognized for the stuff he did. And he's passed along, and I just wanted to remind people that I think it's important to remind us of people that have gone and passed on. We don't want to forget their stuff because it had an impact. And, as Darth Vader up there says, it's not always the dark side of the Force that wins. Sometimes the light side wins too. Okay, so anyways, the next artist that I chose, because I'm doing 2 per episode, that was the number I chose to do. And then the next one had quite a bit more impact with me than the first one. I'm just going to remove my notes for Johnny Burnett there so that I can read my notes for Sam Cooke, who is the next artist that we're doing here. Sam Cooke had a pretty substantial impact on me early on in my life. I'd say in my late childhood, early teens, I really, I was awkward like most teenagers in that, and I really pined to be have a girlfriend and be happy, and I saw the whole marriage thing and all that, and a lot of Sam Cooke songs were very geared to that type of music that would make you want to be in that feeling of love and stuff like that. So anyways, Sam Cooke was born on January 22nd, 1931 in Clarksdale, Mississippi, and he died on December 11th, 1964 at the age of 33 in Los Angeles, California in a hotel. Now that scene is, I don't really want to get into it too much, just enough to know that he died of a shotgun blast, killed by a hotel manager, and the hotel manager and the girl that was involved with Sam Cooke at the time had their own story and about what happened, but a lot of Sam Cooke's fans and his family said there was a lot of holes in their story, and they didn't believe that, and they think that perhaps he was robbed and murdered and his money was taken. And in those days they didn't have Interact and credit cards weren't common, so a lot of people carried these big wads of cash on him, and he was no different. And so they think that he was probably lured to his death, but there's no proof of any of this because it was never investigated, and I don't really want to get into that. That's not the meaning of this video, so just wanted you to be aware of that, and if it's a story you want to read more about, you're welcome to do so. Okay, so Sam Cooke is basically known for gospel, soul, and pop music. That's the genre he kind of was mostly involved with. In fact, that's what he was involved with. Okay, so he started out, he's a vocalist. He plays some piano and guitar as well. That's his involvement with it. And he was active from 1951 to 1964 upon his death. Okay, so his family life, his parents, Annie Mae Clark was his mother. His father was the Reverend Charles Cooke, and this was the beginning of Sam Cooke's music because his dad allowed him to sing in the choir for his church. After a bit of time, he joined 3 of his siblings because he had 8 of them. 3 of them and him formed a child singing group, the Singing Children it was called, and they did basically gospel stuff in the 1950s. Okay, so he was doing that for a while, and then he was doing it was like maybe a gospel conference, or not a conference, but like a concert with different gospel groups. And one of the groups was the Soul Stirrers, who noticed Sam Cooke, and they had conversations. He eventually joined the Soul Stirrers, who was a gospel group in the 1950s. He was about 19 when this happened. And he sang with them, but he always had aspirations to be more. He wanted to be more. He didn't want to just stay a gospel singer. He wanted to explore other kinds of music, and especially the mainstream stuff, pop and soul and stuff like that. He's actually been referred to on several sites as being the king of soul, which is better than the godfather of soul, and we know who that is. Anyways, so he, under a different name, because the Soul Stirrers were a gospel group and they didn't want to be associated with that, so he released a single under Dale Cooke, but they kind of found out about it, and then they said, well, if you want to do that stuff, you're going to have to leave because we don't want to be tied with that. So there wasn't really any kind of animosity there. It was just he just went off and did his own thing, and so he signed a contract with a smaller label to release his own stuff, and he started releasing his own stuff, and right away he did well. In fact, over the course of his time, he had about 30 singles that got into the top 100 Billboard Hot 100. He had about 30 songs get in there. That's quite a bit, quite a bit. But his first single His first solo single was You Send Me, which is probably my favorite song that he's ever sang. It sold 2 million copies in the 1950s. That was among the best-selling songs of that time period, which put him on the map. So after he'd been with this small label for a while, he decided he wasn't really happy there because there was things they couldn't do or wouldn't do, or basically I think they just weren't equipped to do things he wanted to do. So he decided, because he was being pursued by some of the bigger labels, like the two bigger ones like Atlantic and RCA, and so he was, he decided not to go with Atlantic because they wanted the rights to his music, and he was a pretty shrewd entrepreneur for that time period. A black guy in the 1950s, he had some clout, right? He was a very good entrepreneur, a very good businessman. And so he went with RCA and retained the rights to his music, which I think was pretty smart for that time period. And he was also an activist. So, I mean, this played into where he was going. Anyways, he released this song, You Send Me, and, he started releasing other hits. And so this is what he looks like. This is Sam Cooke. This is one of my albums by him, one of the ones I listen to the most. Has a lot of really good stuff on it. So I just wanted to give you a kind of a history of him and his growing up and his involvement, his parents, and all that kind of stuff. So he got to this stage and he started releasing some really good songs. Some songs that are probably still fairly well known and have had some longevity and what they would call memorable songs. Some of these songs I really like a lot. Like You Send Me, of course, is my favorite. Only 16, again, we heard that one before, right? But a different version. It's not the same one. Anyways, that one was good. The Cha Cha Cha, which was released a little bit past that time period for those kind of 50s dancing, but still memorable song. One of my favorites, For Sentimental Reasons. This really highlights the kind of crooning type voice that this guy had. Just really beautiful. A Wonderful World, of course. Chain Gang, which was one of his heavier songs, I guess that's what you want to call it. He never would have called it that in the old days, but it's a bit heavier than a lot of his stuff. Chain Gang. Cupid, of course, is well known. Bring It On Home. There's another really good bluesy kind of stuff that led to that bluesy sound that he was so well known for as well. So he had a fairly large impact, I think, on that type of music, the soul music, which, a lot of this is dragged into rock by a lot of later artists, and he had a huge impact on that, I think. I think there's very few artists from that time period that had the kind of voice he had, at least as far as rock music goes. I mean, there were some crooners, that Frank Sinatra and Nat King Cole, Bing Crosby, and that they had some great voices too. But for the rock type of music he did, which was more rock oriented or more proto rock, if you want to call it, soul, rhythm and blues and stuff like that, he definitely had the voice. And when I did my top 25 vocalists of all time, I based it on just rock vocalists. Otherwise, if I had just based it on voices, he definitely would have been in the top 10 for sure. Him and Nat King Cole both, and of course Bing Crosby, they would have all been right up there because I really like that style of music, but we're not doing that on this site. So, but for this video, I wanted to give some attention to the great and the late Sam Cooke, one of the great vocalists of all time, proto rock and roll or pop, whatever you want to call him. Definitely was impactful in that field. I believe he's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I would have to go look. Not that that really matters because I'm not a huge fan of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but if he isn't, he deserves to be there from his influence. Lots of songs, lots of music, lots of really good stuff, and a wonderful voice. So if you're listening, Sam Cooke, I hope you realize that you may be gone, but you are definitely not forgotten. Dying at 33, I just wonder where this guy could have went if he'd lived longer. I'm sure he would have been right at the top in a lot of fields. anyways, so I hope you liked this video, and if you do, subscribe as well. And and give me your list of people that from 1964 that you think really should be remembered for their great music. People who've passed, and tell me what your experience is with Johnny Burnett and Sam Cooke. I'd love to hear more about it. Can't learn enough about people like this. You can read stuff on the internet, but sometimes you get different opinions from people, and if I said something that you don't agree with, I'd like to hear it too, because maybe I got it wrong. That's possible. Anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this video. So what's going to happen moving forward is we will be doing one of these videos starting today in 1964 right through to 2022 every second day. So tomorrow's released Monday, and then the next one will be on Wednesday, and then Friday, and then so on. And what I'll probably end up doing, because of my work schedule, is I will probably record the video like I am at night and release it for the morning, Monday morning. And then I'll do the same and release it for Wednesday morning for my next one. And the next couple of artists are, I think, going to be pretty good too. And I had a hard time because I really wanted to talk about Nat King Cole tomorrow, but I don't see really his connection with rock music. So as much as I love Nat King Cole, I think he may be the greatest vocalist of all time. Definitely one of my favorites. I just don't think for this particular type of show that we're doing, I don't think he's kind of fits in. And maybe something else will happen someday and I'll bring it up. But, so we'll be doing 2 more on Wednesday, and then another 2 we're doing 1965 on Wednesday and 1966 on Friday, and moving forward, try to get as many great people in here as I can. As we go along, obviously, the numbers will swell as we get into the 70s and 80s, and I won't be able to do them all, but that's where you guys come in. You guys can mention them in your comments below. I may mention a few of them as just a passing, but, please mention them. We could talk about them too. It's great. Anyways, I hope you liked it, and so you have a good night. Prog Monster out. Take care.